Welcome to anyone who is just joining us for this afternoon session. Again, I'm Holly Barrett. I'm with the Omaha Downtown Improvement District, and Christina and I are putting this forum on today as really a way to give back to the community and try to help the folks that are out there on the job market or thinking about being on the job market. Maybe you are brand new to it. Maybe you are have been in the workforce for a long time and suddenly need to find a new job with the new economy. So this is one of those fun ways to, well, I hope it's fun, to remember how to market yourself, how to talk to people, how to look for a job and what to say. And this one is one of the most important ones. This one is how to interview like a pro. This is probably, this and your cover letter, honestly, are your two most important things. And maybe the thank you letter too, just throwing it out there. But we're joined here today by Whitney Hoskins, who is with First National Bank. Whitney has received her Bachelor of Business Administration in General Business from Eastern Kentucky University, and she's got a Master's of Arts in Adult and Higher Education with specialization in communication from Morehead State University. She's previously worked in higher education within the business administration offices and financial aid. And in May of 2017, she and her husband embarked on an adventure of relocating from Lexington, Kentucky. By the way, my mom is from there, so I know why you relocated, to Omaha. She started, I'm sorry if I just offended any Kentuckians. She started at First National in July of 2017 as an intern with the corporate compliance complaints team. And then she had the great opportunity to transition into the management trainee program. So she very closely, not only was she there just a couple years ago doing this interview stuff, but she certainly is a part of things as they come along. So Whitney, I'm so happy to have you with us today. Kaisi, do you have anything you'd like to throw in there?
It's been great working with Whitney and Hope over the past couple of months. Looks like Hope can't join us today, which I'm very sad about, but I know Whitney's going to do a great job with what she's about to present. So I'm just really excited and looking forward to seeing what she can teach all of us. Thank you again, Whitney.
All right, Whitney, go ahead, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you all for having me. I'm really excited to kind of spend time with everyone today and talk about the interview piece of the job process. Now, throughout this time, I do like interaction, so I please will ask if you have questions at any point, unmute yourself and ask them, put them through chat, whatever that looks like, so that way we can kind of talk about what's relevant, because I'm sure if you have a question, there's probably others that have the same question as well. So let me attempt to share my screen here, if I can. Okay, then someone could just let me know here in a second if you see the presentation okay as I try to pull it up. Does that show okay?
Yep, it looks like you're in presenter view. Oh, there you go.
Got it. Okay, good. You know, this year has been an adventure with learning technology in a new way and presenting virtually. So thanks for hanging in there with me. I shared earlier, I did have a colleague who was going to present with me today, got pushed to something else, pulled to a new thing. So Hope is the one who actually helped me put this slideshow together. So this is kind of the brain power of both of ours, and just thoughts as both of us are both recruiters and work regularly with individuals as they're kind of moving to the next step in their career. So what I'm going to start with first is sharing a little bit about who FNBO or First National, you'll hear me refer to it as both, who we are, just to give you a little background, and then we'll get into the interview pieces from there. So we are headquartered here in Omaha, so the big tower downtown, that's us. We're hard to miss. And then we also have a couple other buildings that are kind of right there across the street and then the street behind. So our main big building, and we have our own dedicated technology building as well. The company was founded in 1857. I love to share that just really to bring to light how long FNBO has truly been part of the Omaha community. We've really grown with the community, and I think you, anyone that spent any time in Omaha, you definitely have seen FNBO's mark around. We have over 4,500 employees, and we have over 100 retail banking locations that go across the 7 states that you see to the right on the map. This slide shares a little bit how we are involved in the communities that we are part of. So in all the states,
Whitney,
yes.
it looks like it's stuck on your first slide on our view.
Oh, really? Hold on. Is it changing any? Can you see as I'm moving through them, or is it still stuck? Well,
No, it's not moving.
Okay.
Are you still in presenter view? I know there's a couple different formats for it.
Hold on, let me see what I've got here.
And if you have multiple displays, it could be on one display and not projecting to the other display.
Okay. Well, hold on. Let me stop sharing and then let me redo it, because maybe that would be helpful. Hold on. I've got, I think it's because there's multiple things open. So let me give it a try again.
No worries. There was earlier when this pandemic hit, there was a story that came out. This boss, she accidentally applied a filter to her video camera, and she was talking to her teammates in the shape of a potato head. So at least you didn't accidentally apply a filter of a potato on your face.
Well, you know what? I think that would be kind of interesting. Okay, let me give this one more go and see. Try pulling my presenter screen up a different line. Okay, are you seeing anything now, and what does it look like, so I know how to?
It's in presenter mode, so we're seeing 2 slides. It's not on the full screen.
Can
Okay.
you duplicate slideshow? I would click oh, there we go.
Okay.
But that does look like it's zoomed in. Yeah, it's cut off.
Okay, let me try the, like you said, the duplicate slides and see if that helps. Oops.
That looks good.
Okay, hold on. Okay, hopefully that will work. We'll see. Okay, so can you see when I switch slides just now?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, I think we're in business. So this slide here just shows a little bit about the work that we do in the community. So in all 7 states that FNBO is in, we like to truly be part of the community and participate in some way and help make the communities better. So this shares just a little information around what that looks like and how we do that. So here, just sharing some information around employment perks. And of course, these are not perks that are specific to us. Many organizations that you'll see will kind of have similar perks. So as you're going through their career journey, things to consider and look for, of course, health being one of those. For us, we like to mention flexible scheduling, because for a lot of our departments, life happens. So we kind of try to be flexible in what that nature looks like and what your hours are like, depending on the role, of course. Tuition assistance. So for a lot of you having the idea of wanting to further your education, this is a way and an opportunity for you to be able to do that through our tuition assistance program. As well as employee banking discounts, learning and development. So opportunities for you to use our LinkedIn Learning portal in order to take additional courses or things that you may have interest So I share this slide and I kind of laugh a little bit in the sense that, yes, we are a bank, we are in the financial industry. I was a person that before I worked at a bank, I never would have imagined that I would have worked at a bank or had ever had any plans to, because for me, it's like, what am I going to do? I have no desire to go kind of in that financial direction. And I meet a lot of people at career fairs and things who will see us and be like, oh, you're a bank, I'm good, I don't want to work at a bank. Well, I share this to show there are so many different areas and departments that you can go into and that you can get experience from. So really, we have a little bit of something for pretty much everybody, depending on kind of the roles that you're looking for and what your interests are and what your background is. So I always like to share this to kind of give you an idea of interest. So that way maybe you can kind of start thinking about us a little differently, not just us, but thinking about other organizations differently and what types of roles or business units that they may offer. So now we'll kind of get into truly the meat of our presentation today around interviewing. So before you can actually sit and speak with someone for an interview, you have to land the interview. So these are some things that I'll kind of quickly read through these and then I'll touch on different points as we're kind of going through this as well. So some things that we'll discuss when it comes to how you can go about landing an interview. First, review posting directly on an organization's career page. So for the job search, there's a lot of times that you, of course, may look at, Indeed, Monster, just different sites to look at positions. But one thing to kind of keep in mind that a lot of people don't know is for some of those companies, they actually do what they call a scrape. So they go to different companies' websites, kind of take the roles and post it on there. So sometimes information doesn't kind of get translated over well. So I always suggest if you see a role available on any of sort of these third-party websites that you're maybe looking at roles on, always circle back around to the actual career page of the company that you're interested in and take a look there just to make sure kind of you're getting the full scope of what the job is. Sign up for job alerts and reminders. So a great way when you're in the job search, I know I've been there, especially when I first moved to Omaha and I was looking for work. You're on so many different sites and you're like, did I check this website today? Did I check this company today? Do yourself a favor and kind of help the process a little bit by signing up for job alerts. So like for us, if you go to your career page, you have the opportunity to kind of create yourself an account and then you can mark what type of roles you'd be interested in. And I'll send you email reminders that say, hey, roles in the marketing department have become available. Check these out. So do yourself a favor and make already the grueling task of job searching just a little bit easier. Leveraging free tools to structure your search. So this is about keeping yourself organized as you said, you'll apply for a lot of roles at one time. Whenever I've been in the job search and I have applied for different roles, I just use an Excel spreadsheet, just something really simple to be able to kind of go through the process and kind of keep yourself track of what you've applied for, what you've gotten feedback on. It just kind of helps keep you organized. Updating your LinkedIn profile. So this is another piece that's helpful when trying to land a job. Much like your resume, keeping it up to date, you want to do the same for your LinkedIn profile. As you are applying for roles and recruiters are checking out your resume, they also may look at your LinkedIn profile. So you want that to truly reflect where you are in your job search at this time. Review minimum required qualifications. So for every job posting, qualifications are truly going to be different. And so it's really important that you truly read through them, pay attention to what it is that you're actually applying for based on what your background is and kind of what you're looking to do next. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Get to know your recruiter. So anytime you apply for a role, generally you'll receive sort of an email that automatically populates that says like, hey, thank you so much for putting your application in. Someone will be connected with you soon. And then sometimes they kind of give information about who the recruiter is for that role, or who more than likely you'll be connecting with during that time. Don't be afraid to kind of utilize LinkedIn, look that person up, kind of understand who you're going to be working with. And that way, whenever you're continuing communication with, you already kind of have an insight of knowing who you're going to be speaking with. Inquire about opportunities for virtual or on-site job shadow or tour. So for different companies, depending on the role, reach out. If there's a role that you truly have interest in, you think the department's going to be a good fit, but you're not really sure truly what that day-to-day may look like, reach out and ask. That doesn't hurt. For us, from a recruiter perspective and from a hiring manager perspective, it shows us really you're dedicated and your interest to wanting to learn more about the organization and learn more about the role that you're taking part in. Let's see here. Follow up after 3 business days from when application submitted. So a lot of times, like I said, you'll get sort of an auto reply that says, thanks for applying. Within a couple of days, sometimes it may give you a timeline, sometimes it may not. But if it's been several days and at the point you haven't heard anything back, it doesn't hurt just to kind of send a reply back to the email that you received to say, hey, I applied X amount of days ago. Just wanting to know what the timeline is for this application process. That doesn't hurt at all. It's just making sure that you're keeping yourself informed. Remain patient. Anytime replying for roles is going to be challenging. It's going to be nerve-wracking. There's so many pieces to it, but be patient. As on the side of the company, sometimes things change, they flex, adjustments may need to take place, especially right now during 2020. There's a lot of company changes that have taken place daily, weekly, monthly, really depending on what's going on in the world. So I think that it's a good time to truly, just be mindful that if you're not hearing things or the process seems a little longer than what initially planned, it may not be you or anything that you're doing. It really just may be due to the changes that are going through organization or with the world right now. For us, there was a time kind of earlier in the year where we kind of had a pause on some of our roles. We did send emails out to share that information to let candidates know. And last, provide relevant contact information or timely review of accounts. So please, if you've recently had a number change, an email change, whatever, make sure that is reflective on all pieces you provided. So resumes, cover letters, your application. There are times we've tried to reach out to candidates and we can't get a hold of them. Then they kind of connect later and like, I haven't heard anything. I want to update. Well, it's because there was a miscommunication in that contact information. So that's just something to be mindful of and think about. So just kind of go through before you put your application in, check yourself some boxes and make sure that everything is complete and taken care of. So I'll stop here, and kind of after each slide, especially if there's been a lot of talking for me, I will ask if there are possibly any questions that anyone has.
I do have a couple that came in on chat.
Okay.
How can you find out who the recruiter is if the application doesn't mention the recruiter? And then how can you prepare for knowing your recruiter if you don't know who he or she is?
Yeah, so like I said, for most emails, like sort of auto replies or things that you get, they will share some sort of email. Because I know for us, we have like, I think, for example, it's careers@fnni.com. So all the recruiters receive that email. So you can just send an email there and say, hey, I've recently replied. I had some questions and wanted to get in contact with the recruiter of my role. And then if it's for me, for example, I'll be the one to reply that to the email and say, hey, thanks for reaching out, and kind of give you some more information. And you can go from there for just in case it, like you said, it's not kind of readily available and showing.
And then if you get a confirmation of the job application email with a no reply email address, what avenues should you take to follow up on your application if it doesn't give a direct point of contact?
Yes. So generally on the careers page for any organization, they should have some sort of email or contact available that you should be able to go from there. So always double check the website if by chance it doesn't actually have it, because you're right, there's some of those auto emails that don't really give you a whole lot of information.
That's all I see on the text. So
I do
Okay.
have a follow-up question for that. Sorry.
Yeah.
So then
absolutely.
if, say it's a smaller company maybe, and they don't have as advanced of a hiring system, is it acceptable to ever call and speak to secretary and ask for the hiring manager's information?
Yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid to reach out and make that connection, because at the end of the day, this truly is your job search. It's kind of your next step in your career path. So don't be afraid to kind of reach out, either connect directly with someone or leave a message or whatever that looks like. Yeah, I don't think that's an issue with doing that at all. All right. So preparing for an interview next. So I think people hear this and sometimes it's like, well, I know myself, I know what I've done. But still, before every interview, take a time out and truly prepare yourself. One, these are kind of some pieces. Build your confidence. It's nerve-wracking going into an interview. I don't care how many times you've interviewed. One interview may be more nerve-wracking than the other, but do yourself a favor and really help yourself to do the best that you can and feel comfortable with kind of going into the interview, whether it's later into the day, the next day, or kind of coming up. Do that kind of time just to kind of review, review a couple of things. Review what what the job description is. Like I said, if they provide who it is that you're going to be interviewing with, kind of review those things as well. And also, why prepare? You have competition. Generally, you're not the only person applying, so you always want to bring your best self to the table. Details matter. So making sure that you know what you actually is on your resume. There are times, you'll talk to people and they filled it out, but then they may forget, oh, did I put that detail on there? Or kind of forget to bring something up. So make sure that you're aware of kind of all the details that you've provided and shared along the way. And preparation equals better performance, because it does. When you're prepared, you always will be able to do your best. So this is kind of going into some more details around how best to prepare for an interview. So research the company. You don't have to know extreme details, because clearly on a website, it's only going to provide so much, but know the general things. Be aware that they are, if it's sort of a national company or international company, know those things, where they're headquartered. Those are kind of good things to know. And like I said, look on websites, look on companies' LinkedIn, Google some information. That way you at least know kind of what you're going into about the company. And so that way, if there's any questions along the way throughout the interview, you truly are coming in and looking like you're prepared and you did your homework, because interviewing truly is a two-way street. Review job description. Yes, absolutely review again. Don't go into an interview, especially if it's for an organization that you've applied for a couple different roles. Make sure you know what you're going in to interview for. So go back over the job description, really read, what is it that I'm interviewing for today? What is it that they are looking for a candidate? What are some of the day-to-day things that they've mentioned in the job description that I may want to ask about? Recall examples. So for this, I love this, and this is something that I always do. Like I said, interviews are nerve-wracking, so you can get in there sometimes and maybe forget. And that's okay. I mean, that happens to everybody. But always kind of having yourself in your head some kind of basic examples of projects you've done, specific roles you've had, organizations you've been part of, kind of different things like that, and kind of what that was like. So if you did a project, make sure in your head you know what the project was, how you worked with others, challenges that may have come up. keeping those things kind of just on the back burner. So that way, as you're getting different questions, you kind of have awareness of some quick go-to examples and responses. Practice. It doesn't hurt to have someone in your house, a family member, a friend, to kind of walk through a kind of a faux practice interview, and just have them throw different questions at you. That way you could kind of reply, and part of the recall examples, talk out loud through those examples with someone else. So that way, if something may come off a little odd, you have someone there to be able to share that information with you and tell you. And then last, prepare questions. So a little later in the slides, I do have a slide around sort of some tough questions or general questions that you may get. So this may be something that you want to take the time to think about and consider. And like I said, this piece for prepare for an interview, we'll kind of discuss a little bit more throughout the process. So I guess I'll ask, are there any questions around preparing for an interview, examples, or kind of anything along those lines? All right, sounds like we're pretty question free. All right, so I'll move ahead. So nonverbal communication. So this is something that is important because when you're interviewing, it's not just about what you say. It's also about what you do. During these interviews, recruiters, hiring managers, or different people that you come in contact with during the interview process are going to truly be paying attention to these things. So it's things to consider. So arrival. From the time you step on property, or in the world that we're living with, a lot of video interviews, or that's from the time you logged in, people are noticing, people are paying attention. The interview technically starts at that point. And I say, even if there's a parking garage attached, at that point, the interview starts. You're on property and you really don't know who you're going to come in contact with or kind of move past. So these are things, that's something to consider. Kind of how you're walking in, how you're greeting people, how you're passing people. Dress code. So every company is different, and there's a lot of organizations now that clearly kind of have a more casual, approach to the way that they dress. If you're not sure, one, you can always double check and ask a recruiter about dress code. And two, I always say, no matter what sort of the dress code necessarily of the company is, it's an interview. Come dressed to impress. And as people say, dress for the role that you want. Maybe not exactly where you are now, but where you want to go. So consider that. It's always better in a sense to be overdressed than show up to an interview and be underdressed. For example, if you show up in jeans to an organization that kind of may have a mixed dress code. So things to keep in mind: smile and eye contact. Of course, it shows a sense of friendliness. It shows a sense of connection. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to go into an interview with your face all scrunched up and looking upset. And we know you're nervous, so sometimes you may have a nervous look on your face, and that will be okay too. But you don't want to come off looking angry or kind of make yourself look unapproachable. Firm handshake. So when it comes to meeting someone, shaking their hand, be sure to have a firm handshake, not a real hard shaking someone's arm out of the socket handshake. You don't want that. And you also don't want a real sort of loose, all over the place handshake either. So be very mindful. And again, this is one of those things you can practice, family member, friends, and just walk up and be like, tell me if this is a terrible handshake, and really talk through it and kind of make that okay. Because people, again, those are some things that people pay attention to. Refreshment. So generally with interviews, one, don't walk in with kind of your own, like, just at the Starbucks, here's a coffee. And then two, in the case, there will be times where they'll ask you if you want a bottle of water. It's okay to take it. I know that a lot of people are afraid, like, I can't go in an interview and have something to drink. What if I fill it? What if this, that, and the other? That's okay. Again, when you talk a lot or nervous, your mouth may get dry. So that's okay. And don't worry about that piece. Posture, please, whenever you're going through an interview process, whether that is in person or on video, and we'll talk a little bit more about video interviews later, have good posture. Make sure you're sitting up straight and people can see you. You don't want to be slouched like this, especially if you're in video. You can just see someone's eyes. That's not ideal. So really kind of pay attention to your posture. And then on top of that, on general movement, I say sometimes, different interview processes or times you may not know what type of seat you're going to be sitting in when you're going to interview. Sometimes it may just be a hard, one seat. Sometimes it may be more of like an office computer seat type thing where it swivels. Be mindful of that with your posture as well. You don't want to be excessively moving and doing a lot of things that come off as distracting. Facial expressions, again, kind of talking about that smile and eye contact, very kind of similar in nature, just being very mindful of the expressions that you're giving off. Vocal tone, just be aware of how you're talking. If you're someone, and I can be this person sometimes, where you may come off speaking too loudly or whatever, just be very mindful of kind of the level with your speaking. If you're someone who normally is a really quiet speaker, make sure that you also are mindful of that, make sure that people hear you. And it kind of can come off in confidence too, depending on kind of where you are with that. Pace of speaking. I actually did a mock interview with a college student last week. Did a fantastic job, but the one thing I was like, you speak too fast. So just be mindful about how you're communicating. You don't want to just rush really fast through everything and then you're talking so fast and no one can understand what you're saying. You don't want to do that. You want to really just have a pretty level pace so that people can truly understand what you're saying, also without overly drawing your responses and things out. Hand gestures. This is something I'll admit that I'm bad at, and you may have noticed today when I talk, I do use a lot of hand movements, and it's hard whenever it's in a virtual setting as well. So just be mindful of that. Everyone kind of talks with their hands, but you want to kind of be a little controlled about it. Make sure you're not just, moving your hands all over the place and things, and being too exaggerated with those. Proximity, which I think is kind of an important piece right now, especially right now, of course, there's a lot of sort of measures in place around distancing, but even pre sort of COVID in the world, the 6 feet world that we're in, be mindful whenever you're talking to someone, kind of standing near them. Don't be a close talker where you're just kind of right on them. And so those are kind of just some things to think about. Kind of think about a personal bubble when it comes to proximity and kind of how that looks. Now kind of going through those, are there kind of any questions around these pieces as well?
We did get a couple questions. Our next session is specifically regarding dress, but it's great to get other opinions. So the question is it possible to overdress? Is a suit too much for women?
No, I've gone through every interview that I've ever had with a form of a suit. So sometimes it has been like a specific matching suit. Other times it's just been like a dress pant, blazer and a button up, or a nice sweater underneath. No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. Again, I think it's better in a sense to kind of come in a sense, I hate to use the word overdress, but if you feel that way with wearing a suit, it's better to come like that than sort of on that line of, I think this may be the dress code, I'm not sure. Still present yourself to your best of your ability. I would say kind of going into that answer.
I'm sure you've interviewed a lot. Is there one nonverbal communication mistake, I guess, or pet peeve that you notice that people make the most?
Throughout let me think kind of what that looks like. I think sometimes there's one thing too, especially in this setting, I guess I'll do kind of two. One from like a virtual setting, getting distracted. There's things that we know there's always going to be distraction, noises, this, that, and the other, which is fine. But be mindful to where it doesn't look like you're in the middle of an interview and you're keep going like this to like check your phone, or check something else. So kind of be mindful of that. In person, some things to kind of keep in mind, and I think it kind of just comes around posture and gestures, and people are nervous so they may move kind of a lot. I think just kind of those are some things to be mindful of on the way as far as like kind of this piece.
You touched a little bit on this, but a question came in asking, are there specific rules or advice for virtual interviewing since that is more common now due to COVID?
Yeah, like I said, I do have a slide at the end that will kind of dig a little bit more into this virtual piece, just because it is such a dominant piece of our world right now. And for us, if you're interviewing, it's either going to be over the phone or through video. So we'll touch on that a little later. And so I'll go into detail a little bit more at that point, if that's okay. All right, let's see. Okay, so talk a little bit about the actual question piece of the interview. So the form of interviewing that we do at FNBO is behavioral-based interviewing, and there's a lot of organizations that do some form of this interviewing. They may not have this name on it, but really it's more around situational type question and responses. So the reason behind this is so that way we can kind of get better and insight on who you are, on how you've handled situations along your career in the past, projects, things along that nature. So what we say as far as when we're looking for a response to a question, we say use the STAR method, which you'll see to the left there. So situation and or tasks, action and result. So for the situation or task, explain a situation that you dealt with or a task that you completed that highlights your attributes and accomplishments. So just kind of giving us a scenario of a situation. Like I said, if it's a project, for example, tell us like what the project was that you did in a sense, or that you accomplished or completed. Action, explain the actions you took to overcome the situation or complete the task. So of course, action could really be very wordy and kind of explain a lot to kind of explain how you completed a task or project or whatever that looks like, but keep it high level, give us enough detail so that way we understand what it is that you did in the project, whether you're a team lead, just a team member that handled one specific piece of the project, kind of explain those pieces and explain how that connected maybe to the overall group if it was a team project, how you work together. It looks like keep it high level, but enough detail that we can kind of truly understand the work that you put into it, and kind of understand work that, like I said, again, work that you've done in the past. And then maybe so that way we can understand how it would relate to what you would be doing in the role you're going into. Result, explain the outcome of your action, use data if available. So yeah, let us know how things turn out. Don't just say, well, after doing these tasks, the project was completed. Well, tell us, how it was completed, kind of maybe what came after. Once the project was completed, we had to present to leadership. Then we had some follow-up tasks to do. In the case, use data. We shared this information across the whole organization and got feedback from them, or after that, we were able to implement a new system. Things along that line that kind of gives a little more details around that results piece. And again, we do this to really get a full scope of things that you've done in the past and to make sure that we understand for the items or work that you would be doing with us or any organization, that you understand follow through of a situation or task that you've gone through. And sometimes we'll ask questions around maybe challenging situations. So you had a difficult coworker. Tell us a time that you had a bad interaction with them, or a difficult time working on them with the project, how you worked through it. Conflict, that's kind of understanding how you handle conflict resolution in a sense. So these kind of give us just a better idea of you and just kind of walking through how your thought process is a little bit. So does anyone have any questions around these? And like I said, you may have had these types of questions before, either under a different name, or maybe not realize that you even had these types of questions before, but just things to consider when you are responding to questions and how you're choosing to go about and responding to those questions. So I'll kind of give everyone just a minute just to see if there's any kind of questions around this piece. All right. So now we are to the tough questions. So I'll kind of read through some of these, but I would love to hear from the group. Like I said, if you either want to put questions in the chat or anyone wants to take themselves off mute and kind of share some experiences that maybe they've had with some of these questions. You know, it's not that these questions are necessarily like tough to stump you, but sometimes they're tough because you think, how much information should I share in the question, tell me about yourself, or the question, tell me about a time you demonstrated leadership. Some people, you know, when they see any leadership question, they're thinking, well, I haven't actually been a leader. I haven't done a leadership role. Leadership is by example. So there's a lot of different ways that you could have demonstrated leadership, whether, like I said, it's an actual work role, or if you're part of a board or some type of community organization that you demonstrated leadership. So there's a variety of ways that, you know, some of these questions can be answered or can be, you know, kind of gone about and looked at. So like, what are your biggest strengths and weaknesses? Part of what I shared earlier about making sure you're prepared and have examples, this is a really great one, that always have examples of a couple of your biggest strengths and a couple weaknesses, or sometimes I say areas of improvement. That way you have those in mind, because a lot of people will ask these questions. And so you kind of want to have some things thought through, and don't just say like biggest strength, I'm really good with people, weakness, I'm not great with deadlines. Like, tell why. Tell maybe for especially like the weakness piece, tell what those weaknesses are, why you feel they are a weakness, and maybe some things that you're doing in order to kind of resolve and to maybe turn it into a strength down the road. So I do think I saw a little indicator for a question. I thought I did, but maybe I didn't. So does anyone have any questions first to kind of guide the conversation before I get too deep into these? All right. Well, I'll just kind of keep going on a little bit. Like I said, if anyone has any kind of questions or want to, like I said, would love to hear some great examples that you may have around these questions of things that you thought were a good response or you weren't sure, because I'm sure there's other people on the call that may have questions around these as well. So where do you see yourself in X years? I think for some people with this question, they get a little nervous in the sense that, one, they don't know if they should answer this question based on the role they're interviewing for. They don't know if they should answer based around, oh, well, maybe I should give a response to show that I plan to still be in this company like 10 years from now or whatever it is. For me, I would say just kind of be honest where you are. And if the question is, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Say, you know, I may not know exactly where I want to be in 10 years, but here's some career things that I would like to accomplish during that time that I can see myself doing. Answering it that way is a great way too, because no one knows what they're going to be doing 10 years, let alone 5 years from now. So sometimes that's tough, but giving us insight on kind of where you see your career going and some thoughts that you have around it is a really great time to highlight that and let us know what you're thinking from a future standpoint. Describe a time you had a conflict with coworkers or an ethical situation. How did you handle the situation? Kind of touching this a little bit with the STAR method and responding. So really just think about this as you're preparing, have questions like this kind of at the ready, or responses at the ready for times that you had conflicts. Another thing with questions like this, use general terms of a coworker. Never actually name a coworker. Ideally, do not name like where you previously had worked that, you know, this question applies to, just because at times for, you know, some hiring managers or recruiters, as you're having these questions with them, they could kind of question like, oh, why are they, you know, naming this person or calling this person out in this situation. And then that kind of makes them think, how are you going to be as a team player coming into the organization? So kind of think about how you're sharing those examples, sharing a good example without sharing too much specifics around the individual person or diving too far into detail. I already talked about the leadership piece. How would your managers or coworkers describe you? So this is really kind of a good spot, ideally, where you can highlight yourself a little bit, because we all hope that if you guys surveyed my coworkers right now, I hope that they would share positive insights on me. But also it's the time to kind of be honest too. Like if you're, a past coworker would be like, oh, I love working with them. They're great. But they have like, sometimes communication could be challenging, or if that's something that you're working with a weakness, it doesn't to mention that, but like I said, try to keep, for this question, try to make sure you kind of keep this response on a highlight reel for yourself to say, oh, I think they would say that I'm a hard worker, I'm a team player, things kind of along that line are helpful as well. So do you have any questions for me? The end of an interview, you're probably always going to have this question. Always come prepared with at least a couple questions, whether that is what the day in the life is like, what future projects do you see the person in this role doing, asking about the company. Always come prepared with a few things, because if I've interviewed someone and at the end I ask them this and they're like, no, I don't think I have any questions, I'm good. I'm like, oh, okay. So either you really read everything about us and know everything, or it kind of comes off like, are they truly kind of interested in this organization or this role? So just think about that and really just kind of have a good set of questions. What would stop you from accepting an offer for this position? So you may get that. So if they're just kind of, and they'll use this to gauge kind of where you are with interest. So if you're applying for roles just to apply and just going to all these different interviews, which you may not have interest, that may kind of shine in this. Or in the sense, if someone asks, what would stop you from accepting the offer? And maybe it's nothing, and maybe it's something you hadn't thought about, but kind of go into it. And as you're kind of preparing for the interview, think a little bit about the why behind you want this interview. Think about how it connects to your future goals, how it connects to kind of where you are in your life right now, because think about those pieces as those questions come up. And last, what previous position has given you the most fulfillment and satisfaction, and why? So share a little bit about past roles that you may have, or really projects or something that you may have, and really what about them truly, as people say, build your bucket. What made you feel good about the work? What made you feel good about sort of your career during this time? What kind of brought joy to you to help the organization? This is a good time to highlight that piece as well. So are there any questions around questions?
I've got a question. What advice would you give if the employer asks kind of what your salary demands are or something like that? How do you address that with them?
Yeah, so I think it kind of depends a little bit kind of on the role that you're interviewing for. Now, if it's a role that's very similar, kind of pretty lateral with the role that you're currently in, it doesn't really hurt to, if you don't feel comfortable telling them the exact salary, it doesn't really hurt to tell them the range in which maybe you have been in. If it's a role that is kind of a step or so up from the role that you're currently in, do your homework around what ideally those types of roles, the salary ranges, and it's okay to share with them. Again, I would stick more with a range than necessarily a specific number, but share with them maybe a range that you feel comfortable being in. And also don't forget that when it comes to sort of the salary piece, think about benefits as well. So of course, with that, think about how much PTO you may have and how that balances it out. So think about all the different pieces around salary and benefits when those conversations happen. But if you are asked those during the interview, don't be afraid to be honest where you where kind of you see yourself. And if honestly you're still not 100% sure, share that. Say, I've done a little research. It seems like roles like this are in this range, but with your company, I wasn't sure kind of what that looked like. Could you share a little bit more with me what that salary range is? That way you both can make sure that you're on the same page, because it's hard if you get to the point that an offer is made and the salary is way off where you thought it was going to be.
That's great. And LinkedIn's a great resource too to check out salary basis is in your area too. So another question is what advice would you give in answering some of these questions? Why did you leave your last job? Why do you want this job? Maybe if you were fired from your last job, how do you address that?
Yeah. I think sort of the why you're leaving your current role or past role, whatever that may look like. I always say it's good to be honest, but sometimes not too much information, depending on what it is. If it's a situation where you weren't comfortable in the place that you work, that's when you kind of structured around the organization didn't feel like a good fit for my future career goals. Say things along that line. Don't ever kind of approach it by saying, oh, the management was terrible. You don't want to go that way, just because, again, that comes how you're kind of presenting yourself and how you're sharing information. But say, if the organization wasn't a good fit, maybe the role wasn't a good fit or wasn't what you expected it to be, especially if, depending on the timeline for how long you were at that role, or if you're truly just at the point where you're looking for sort of the next step, new opportunities, new industry, don't be afraid to share that. But I guess I would say, if you're also saying, hey, looking for a new industry, give a little information of why you're doing that. And then as far as if you're said, oh, the organization wasn't a good fit for me leaving, maybe explain the organization wasn't a good fit. Here's what type of organization I would like to work from, and give a couple examples of maybe what that type of organization is that you're looking for. Now, if you had been fired from your role, I think it's one of those situations, again, you want to tread lightly, never say anything false, but I do think it's a sense that, depending on the why the firing happened, kind of going around of it not being a good fit, kind of helps a little bit in that sense, just because, like I said, you don't want, it's just sometimes you have to be careful, because you don't want to come out and be like, well, they fired me. And then it may have like a laundry list of questions of kind of what that's like. But truly just be mindful about how you're wording it. Say it wasn't a good fit, and maybe give some reasons, like, for example, depending on why you were fired, the why it wasn't a good fit, or why you felt like continuing with that organization may not have been the best next step for you. Like I said, just kind of be mindful about how you're responding to those, if that helps. If anyone has like real specifics around that, please feel free to let me know.
How would you explain a career change, like if you went from a bank teller to hotel front desk attendee?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm actually a great person to ask that question, because I've done that. Not so much the teller piece, but I went from working in higher education to then kind of switching and working sales in hotels. And now I'm working in a bank. So I've had a few career transitions. So for me, I was pretty transparent in the sense that there's a variety of careers that I've had interest in over the years. I wanted to take the time to be able to explore those, but I also shared why past roles that I had had led me to feel this transition into this new type of role or industry would be a good fit. So don't just come exploring, say, hey, and I'll use kind of an example for me. So when I worked in higher education, one role that I had was in financial aid. Then when I started the bank, my first role was in compliance, which seemed very different kind of at first glance. But for me, and I'm looking for new opportunities. I'm looking for a different industry and really see what could be a good next direction in my career. I feel like working in compliance would be a good fit for me. As working in financial aid, I had the opportunity to work from a regulation standpoint. Everything that I did in my role from a federal or state standpoint, working with financial aid, scholarships, grants, was all regulated. And then I was able to kind of take some of those rural specific examples and explain how that would be a good fit for me to transition into a compliance role. So really find ways that when you are making that transition, find ways to connect the dots, tell your story, and lead them to why you would be a good fit as you're making this transition in your roles.
And then lastly, how do you discuss longer gaps in employment, especially as we continue to monitor the COVID situation?
Yes. So people have career gaps for many reasons. Some could be taking time out to raise your children, to help with a family member. In the time that we're in right now, it could be because of furlough situation. It could be around comfort level. Because let's be honest, right now, there's a lot of people who have underlying health issues who being out, especially if you're applying for jobs that are more, public facing, who it may not be best for them to do that. So I think in those cases, that's where transparency is key. And, especially like I said, in the world we're in right now, explaining that my comfort level wasn't there due to your situation, your family situation, whatever. My comfort level hasn't been at a place where I felt good to be able to go do back into the job force, especially if all the roles that you previously had been more in person, like we mentioned earlier. If you're in hotels, your job, you have no choice but to be in front of customers all day long. So just kind of being upfront about those and being mindful, but again, kind of connecting the dots. And during that time, were off, if you did some professional development things, took some classes, did like an online Coursera free course, whatever, explain those too. If you're still kind of reading and keeping aware of the job market, explain that too. Say during this time off, when I was helping my, elderly family member, while I did that, I also really read a lot of great, professional development type books to learn more about this topic. So during that time, because let's be honest, most people are always actively still doing something. Just because you weren't technically employed by a company and making a salary doesn't mean during that time frame of unemployment you weren't doing anything. So just really think about how you want to frame that. Again, at the end of the day, during the interview process, you are telling your story. You are painting a picture. Always think about how best you can do that and what that looks like in those times of employment. Just or unemployment, excuse me. Just kind of be honest. And like I said, share some additional details around the why, or like I said, maybe some additional things you've learned during that time. Wonderful. Thanks for the questions, everyone. I also want to mention for these questions, I mean, clearly, you can go online. If you Google interview questions, you will get just a list of different examples of interview questions. So as you're preparing and kind of prepping to go into an interview, don't be afraid to kind of use Google and use some resources to go ahead and kind of ideally think about some practice questions that you can kind of go through and work through as well.
Yeah, and I was actually about to send this to Christina, but I have a template of like 30 tough questions that I've just found over time and kept a whole list of it. I'm going to send that over to Christina, and she can probably make that available for our viewers as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so post-interview follow-up. So just want to kind of touch on this briefly, but so thank you notes. Of course, you always want to send a thank you. However, now with times, been in college, it was like, write a note, you have to write a note, thinking about how you want to go about doing that. So kind of handwritten versus email, I would say it depends. And right now, during this year, there's nothing wrong with doing email. And actually for some organizations, it's probably preferred in the sense that for us, we haven't, well, I think us and FMBO as a whole and many of the hiring managers haven't been on site since March. So getting their mail is going to be a bit of a delay. So doing an email, there's nothing wrong with doing that. I think sometimes it comes down to timing, especially in the sense that if they shared at the end of the interview, if they said, oh, tomorrow's our last day for interviews, and then we'll have a decision, here in 2 days. Clearly, depending on the mail situation, it may not get to them in time. So if sometimes I've had people do both. They have sent me an email, just a quick email, just want to say thank you for your time, kind of shared some insight from our interview. And then a few days later, I may get a handwritten thank you note just because they didn't think it was going to get to me in time before maybe the decision was going to be made for the position. So really kind of play it by ear by the situation. And this, your thank you note does not have to be a novel, but like I said, just make sure you say thank you for your time. And never hurts to maybe, one sentence or a little blurb to mention like a standout piece to the interview. I really appreciated you answering my question about upcoming projects for this role. I look forward to hearing more, kind of things along those lines. Check-in. Now this again kind of comes down to timeline. If a timeline is shared with you at time of interview, it kind of gives you something to go by. So if they say, so if it's, like today, Wednesday, and you leave an interview and they're saying, well, we should have something to you by Tuesday of next week, excuse me, and Tuesday comes and goes and you haven't heard anything yet, it doesn't hurt for that Wednesday to send an email just to say, hey, at the end of our interview, you shared that I should hear something by Tuesday. I just wanted to touch base and still see if that was, touch base and see if the timeline has been extended for a decision being made. Going about that doesn't hurt. Now, if a timeline has not been shared with you, give it a few business days. So if your interview was on a Friday, maybe that following Tuesday or Wednesday, reach out, just because Fridays are crazy and then Mondays kind of following back up and just trying to get their week started. So at least give a few business days before you reach out. And during that time, it doesn't hurt to say, hey, I really enjoyed interview that we had last week or a few days ago. Just wanted to touch base if you could share a little bit more information around the timeline for this application process. So that doesn't hurt at all to do that. Stay in touch. Again, kind of at the beginning where it says to kind of learn a little bit about maybe the recruiter or the hiring manager as you're going into a role. Again, it doesn't hurt to connect on LinkedIn, especially if it's an organization that you're really excited about being part of. It absolutely does not hurt to kind of connect with them on LinkedIn and just, you can put a note whenever you connect with someone on LinkedIn and say, hey, I enjoyed our interview time. This organization sounds really great. And it's, somewhere that I truly see myself being part of. So I wanted to keep in touch with you, for long-term opportunities or something along that line. That doesn't hurt to do that too and follow up post an interview. And so we'll touch base now a little bit on digital interviews, just because right now, this is a time where this is the majority of what companies are doing. So format, in the sense that there's kind of a couple ways to look at format. Format in which kind of technology you're using, and format in kind of how the interview process will go. So there may be some situations where it truly is one-on-one, you and the hiring manager. And then it could be a situation where, sort of like today, there's multiple people in a room. So you could do more of like a panel interview, the hiring manager and a couple people on the team that you're on. So generally when you go into an interview or like they kind of are setting up the time and everything with you, they will share if you're going to have a couple people in your interview with you. So kind of be prepared for that. In the sense to having an in-person interview with multiple people, it's a little bit more casual, relaxed. You can move, kind of having different people on the screen and going through that process. It can be a little different. And one thing that I share, and I'm not great at this, when you have multiple people on the screen and kind of keeping folks on your camera, you're kind of looking at one that's talking. So just kind of be mindful of kind of how you're approaching those interactions and thinking about those as well. But in the sense, treat this digital interview like you would an in-person for the most part. Overall, nothing changes except the format in which you're talking to the individual. Test your technology. There are so many different forms of video applications that people are using. So Zoom, we use WebEx at work. I think there's like Google Meets or Hangouts and Microsoft Teams, all these different things. If you've never used it before, you don't have it downloaded on your phone, your tablet, your laptop, as soon as you get information about the interview and the format and the type of platform that it's going to be on, go ahead and download it. Test it for yourself, have a friend be like, hey, let me send you this link, or see if we can pull up together to make sure that it's coming up correctly. Make sure your audio works with it when you're connected to it. In the case, I'll use myself for example. I have, with my laptop, I have an additional screen attached to it. Sometimes my audio is attached to my monitor, so my audio won't come through, and I have to go into the settings and manually fix it in order to do that. So think about those things in advance. You don't want to kind of get into an interview and then spend 10 minutes trying to solve for the problem. And always have your phone, of course, on silent because you are in an interview, but have it handy in the sense that if audio on either your side or the organization side isn't seeming to work, that way you have really quickly your phone available for backup to where you guys can just call each other. I've had to do that a couple of times too. So just kind of think about these things. Interview prep the same exact way you would for in-person interview. Again, nothing is different except the format in which you're interviewing for. So prep. Dress appropriately. I will say you do not need to put on a full suit, but a jacket over some sweatpants, that's okay. More than likely for an interview, you're not going to need to stand up, I would assume. But just make sure, at least waist up, you do have on still, a button up, a jacket, making sure that you're still prepped and buried together, again, like you would for an in-person type situation. Because at the end of the day, even though you are at home and you are at your computer, it is a job that you're going after. So be mindful. Pick a good location. So be mindful of where, if it's at your house, if you're doing an interview, let's say at like a library or do space or something like that, be mindful and really think about where you're sitting, what the lighting is like, what the sound is like. Are you going to have a lot of distractions? Are you going to have like a real busy background? Like if let's say you're in front of a window, or neighbors going to be walking by, all those things. You really need to think about what that looks like. You, again, want to eliminate as much distraction as possible. Right now, we're all flexible. We know you're at home. For example, perfect timing. One of my neighbors just started mowing their lawn. Those are things we know that you cannot help. And so those are things to think about. And another example, sometimes unexpected things happen. I'll use myself. Just the other day, I had, at the end of the day, I had a couple of video calls, and the timing happened to work out that minutes before I got in the call, they came to jackhammer up my front porch. So, I mean, there are unexpected things that go on. So think quick on your feet. Think if something were to come up, how am I going to handle this? What am I going to do? What's my backup plan? So all of that kind of goes under location. So since someone had a question earlier around digital interviews, do you have any sort of follow-up questions or concerns or anything that you're curious on?
Yeah, so you said you basically dress up, waist up for digital interviews. You don't have to be full-blown dressed up. Do you think it would help though in terms of maybe like self-confidence and motivation to in fact be fully dressed up and prepared as if you were going to an on-site interview?
Yeah, I say it doesn't hurt. You have to do what's going to make you feel your best and come to the interview at your best. So if being fully, head to toe, dressed up, suit, whatever that looks like for you, then I say go for it.
Great, thank you. And I did have one more question. So say you interview with more than one person, or the person that set you up with the interview isn't the person that you interview with. Would you say it's acceptable to ask for either a business card, or if they don't have one, their direct email address? And just to say, in case I have additional questions about the role later on, and also to send a follow-up thank you email?
Yes, absolutely. You're right. There are situations like that where in advance you be told you're interviewing with, XYZ. Or at the last minute, a manager's like, hey, I had my teammate come sit in. There is nothing wrong with asking for that contact information of that, additional person, or if you don't have it, to say that. I think that's something that people would appreciate. Everyone loves getting a thank you email or card. So absolutely feel free to ask before you head out before you kind of leave the interview. Okay, and I think I have one more slide. So decided to throw this slide in because, when it comes to interviewing and looking for new roles, everyone's not always looking for new roles at another organization. Sometimes you are looking to stay at your current organization and just finding different ways to kind of transition. It's kind of that next step for you. So kind of wanted to share a little bit of information around interviewing internally and kind of what that looks like and steps to take. So one call out is connect with recruiters. So for me and all the other recruiters on my team, we are always open and always receiving email from individuals across the organization, kind of asking to have career discussions, just helping them to figure out what are next steps for them in their roles, what could be new opportunities for them across the organization. So feel free to connect to your recruiting team. Connect with your current manager when appropriate. Now, this is one of those situations that your manager, your team, your situation. There are some managers that are, that have had consistent conversations with their employees to know that they are wanting to look for next things at X amount of time, and you can feel comfortable to talk to them and say, hey, I think it's time for me to take a new opportunity elsewhere in the organization. Now, if you feel like for your current manager that bringing up something like this to them would not be ideal, they wouldn't take it well, then do not share that information until kind of later in the process you feel like the time is right. Again, you have to do what works best for you. Connect with hiring manager team members. So if there's a department, let's say right now you're in the operations department, but really interested in going to mortgage, reach out to, if you know a potential hiring manager or know some people that work in the mortgage department, reach out to them and ask them questions and just say, hey, could we put some time on the calendar for me to talk to you about some roles that I'm interested in, or how you transition to the mortgage department? What I've learned, and this is from our organization, people really enjoy talking to people about their role and kind of how they move departments and kind of their next step. So don't be afraid to do that if you're truly wanting to learn more about a different department than what you're in or what you've worked for in the past. Internal transfer documentation, when you do switch to a new role in your organization, you will still have to go through a standard process of an offer letter and completing some sort of form or online information in order for that transition to happen and to make it official. So no matter what, you should always have some sort of offer letter or document that is given to you when you are making that internal transfer. Job shadowing or incumbent interviews. This kind of goes to connecting with team members a little bit. So in the case, sometimes people allow you to job shadow. Yeah, you can spend time instead of a meeting, but here, can you tell me about a role? But sometimes you can reach out to hiring managers or departments you're interested in and see if for, you know, one day or a couple hours, you can spend some time seeing how they do their day-to-day processes. That way you truly get an idea of what the work is and you know whether that's work that you truly can see yourself doing. Prepare for interview. Again, no matter your interview format, like I said, digital, internally, always prepare. Prepare like this is a whole new experience for you. Also prepare in the sense that prepare to connect work that you've done previously in the organization to where it is that you're wanting to go. So think about it holistically, what that would look like. And last, kind of another point, again, you will have competition. If it's specifically if it is a role that your organization has posted and it's an internal only posting, you're going to have different people across the organizations that are interested in the role, that are looking at it, that may have either also, or if you haven't, have taken part in job shadowing opportunities, interviewing people on the team. So do your best to kind of think about all those pieces and do what you can to best help yourself in that situation. So that's actually the last content slide, which we've done questions throughout, but if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to let me know. I'd love to answer.
I don't have any more questions in the Q&A or chat, it looks like. This has been really good, Whitney. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. What I'll do real quick, I'll switch. So there are resources, and I think, Christina, you have those to share with the group. And lastly, just want to share my information and Hope information, who, like I said, helped put this together, who's on the recruiting team as well. This is our email contact. And then to the right, you see, if you are interested in learning more about careers at FNBO, please go to our site and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well, if that is kind of a better avenue for you to reach out.
Whitney, thank you so much. That was really, this has been my favorite one so far. That was really wonderful. You know,
well, thank you.
It was really insightful to hear all of the attention that you put into the nonverbal communications and those aspects of how you present yourself. Again, as a hirer, I really look at that. My day-to-day job is fundraising and managing projects, and that means working with people. So I pay attention to body language first and foremost. And it's very much something that I look at when I'm hiring. How is this person going to react when I take them into a meeting for the first time with a major donor? Or how are they going to stand when I present them to my board chair? How's that handshake going to go? So, you know, those are really important things. So I was really happy to see that was a huge portion of what you presented on. So I hope that that everybody got all the questions that they had answered. And again, this one is one that people are going to have questions pop up and could use some advice on how to answer things. So please, everyone, please feel free to reach out.